A little bit about me. I started my career in TV news as a cable news producer. I worked for the national network and cable news shows for 8 years. There was really not a network I didn't work at. I worked at Fox, CNN, MSNBC, CNN, CNBC, and I was always what's known as a booker. So I was responsible for finding the guests and then booking them, meaning getting them to come on the show and do an interview with our anchor. Speaking of anchors, I worked for so many over the years, from Diane Sawyer to Deborah Norville, Dan Abrams, Donnie Deutsch, and Burnett, and so many more. I was lucky enough to have a little bit of on-camera experience as well. So my career, the first part of my career was always focused in broadcast television in the media. So I pivoted 10 years ago to open up my own PR firm, which is called Pace Public Relations. In May, we celebrated our 10th anniversary, which was pretty excited. We are headquartered in New York. We have offices in DC and LA. There's 10 of us full-time, and we have about 40 clients right now. So my firm is a full-service public relations firm focusing on media relations. Our main charge for our clients is getting positive exposure across a myriad of industries, including media, business, lifestyle, technology, education, healthcare, mental health, retail, etc. So we really work in all different industries. The most common thing we get asked to do for our clients, however, is to get them exposed in the media. So to get a great article in a newspaper, in a magazine, in broadcast television, etc. So today I'm going to talk to you about 5 tips for being your own publicist. The first tip that I have is to perfect your messaging. So, a lot of you who are watching may not have money on a PR firm. You may not even know where to begin. The first step is to perfect your messaging. So messaging, really, to me, this means your elevator pitch. So elevator pitch is really described as how you present yourself. How do you describe yourself, what you do, what your brand does in 30 seconds or less? It should be clear and concise. So when somebody says to me, well, Annie, what do you do? What's your elevator pitch? I simply respond back, I can get you on TV. That's usually enough to get people interested. They want to hear more. And from there, I can go on and on describing some of the things I said in the last slide about how my firm works and the things that we do. But it's really, if you don't know how to describe what you do and what your firm does in 30 seconds or less, a couple sentences, then you have a real problem on your hand. And so it's best to really take some time to think of this. How do you describe your company? But most importantly, all anyone really wants to hear about is the ROI, the return on investment, because presumably you are not giving away your services for free. You're charging for them. So a potential client, a potential customer wants to know, well, what am I going to get for the money I'm paying for your services? So you have to make sure that that's clear and that you understand what the value is in working with you and your firm. So the messaging, point number 2 is your messaging should be uniform and clear across all platforms. So, a lot of us, really all of us have some kind of digital footprint. So it's really important that when you're building your company, that you have the same consistent messaging on your website, that you have in your press materials, and that you have on your social media. You need to make sure that your social channels are updated and that you have ready to go on your Facebook, not the Facebook from when you were in college, but instead a more professional leaning Facebook page, and make sure you have your business page up to speed as one thing I would encourage everyone to do is to do a Google audit on yourself. You're going to be surprised what you might find out there, but as an employer, whenever I'm hiring, I always do a Google search on prospective candidates. And that's important because presumably somebody who's going to be paying for your services and retaining you is going to be doing the same. So you want to make sure there aren't any surprises out there, and that you have a clean, easy to understand, accessible digital footprint. And then once you do all of that, you want to make sure that you maintain your digital presence. Social media has to be updated regularly, because if it's not, it's going to give the impression that you're not in the mix, that you're not taking your business seriously, and that you are not doing your part to promote the services that you're providing and the good work that you do for clients. So I would just make sure that, whether Twitter is important to you, LinkedIn, Insta, etc., just make sure that you find a cadence that you're comfortable with, to make sure that you regularly and routinely update your social media. My other piece of advice is that if you have a budget, to try to invest in SEO. So SEO means search engine optimization, and my cousin helps me with it, and it's been really a great and surprising way to help grow my business. And so if you're thinking of how to be your own publicist, part of that is letting people know who you are and that you're out there and the types of stuff that you do. So with SEO consultant that we retain, she is able to make sure that when somebody types in NYC PR firm or NYC literary agency, whatever the case may be, that me and Pace Public Relations is going to pop up higher in that Google search. So really important. You can get great SEO services for not a ton of money, but it certainly helped to raise our organic search traffic and also increase the inbound inquiries that we get through our website of people looking to learn more about our services. The third thing that you can do is be your own publicist, to target trade publications in your sector. So every sector or vertical has relevant trade publications. And what that means is that it's an industry-specific periodical that is meant to be read only by professionals in that sector, and it's news about that sector. So it's not mainstream. It's not something you're going to see in like the New York Times or on Fox News or, I hear on your radio. It's, doctors have their own trade publications. Tech pros have theirs. In PR, we have ours. And so there's PR News, TV Newser, and several others. And the reason I say to target trade publications within your sector is that, typically speaking, it's easier to get featured in a trade publication than it is in a mainstream news outlet. Trade pubs are in need of fresh content regularly. For a lot of different sectors, there's not limitless resources that they can go to. So a lot of times they're really grateful and happy when you reach out to them with a good story. So you're just going to have a higher likelihood that trade publication, a reporter or an editor at that pub is going to be more interested in talking to you and seeing if there's a way to put together a story about you and about your company. Another benefit is that trade publications tend to write longer, more in-depth pieces. So you'll have a great piece of press to show after you make the connection with them. And the other thing that's a really nice benefit is that trades are not competitors of the mainstream press. So, for me, if I wrote, there's a story for me in PR News about how my company has, pivoted to do more virtual work, the pandemic, I could use that to pitch, say, an Entrepreneur or a Forbes or a Fast Company or something like that, because those reporters are not going to see trade publications as a competitor, but at the same time, it will increase your validity, your credibility, your legitimacy in the eyes of that mainstream reporter, because trade reporters are really well respected as well. I would also say that thinking locally is super important. So everybody, wants to get in national, big, tier one newspapers, magazines, TV programs. And there's no doubt that when you're in those national publications, it can certainly help increase your visibility and your awareness for sure. But it's a really heavy lift to, think that you recently started a company or you're not that well known and you're going to get featured in USA Today. It's better to start thinking about, well, what are the local outlets that I can position myself to be featured in? So that's another place that I would start. So if your business is rooted in your local market's coverage area, reach out to them, introduce yourself, let them know about any newsworthy events your company is holding or any industry news. But it's always really important to remember the audience, right? So the audience locally is your everyday American family who is sitting down to watch the local news while they're having their dinner or while they're having their coffee in the morning. They're reading the local paper and, you presumably read your local paper, you watch your local news. You know already the types of stories that they're going to be covering. So make sure that when you're reaching out to them, the angle that you're pitching them fits into the type of coverage that they already normally focus on. So another way that you could sort of get in with news is much like national news is local news does need local thought leaders and experts to round out their packages. So whether it's a print reporter filing a story on a local trend or it's an on-camera reporter who's putting together a package for that evening's news, there usually will cut to an expert giving a soundbite or two about the story. Or if you read in the article, the reporter will be quoting several sources within it. So it might be a good idea to think of the broader area that you yourself are an expert in and reach out and let them know that you are available as a commentator should they need a source like that for their stories. Another thing that people often forget, but that I think is an easy way to try to get press, is to pitch the local market where you grew up. So even if you live in Orlando now, but you grew up in Chicago, reach out to the Chicago outlets and let them know about your success. Let them know about your company's launch. Let them know exciting initiatives that you're offering, particularly if your services are national and they are people living in Chicago or your hometown are able to participate in the sort of company and the services that you're offering. A lot of those local markets like to do kind of like a hometown hero or a look at a spotlight of success of someone locally who grew up there. So definitely consider that and keep that in front of mind. And then another thing too is to remember to pitch your college's alumni publication. I went to Smith College in Massachusetts. I get my Smith Alumni Quarterly every quarter, and I really read it. I get ideas for pitching. I get ideas for potential clients. I like to just see what everyone's been up to and what's new at the school. But it's a great way to stay connected and to sort of show off the good work that you're doing. And lastly, and probably most importantly, is when you're trying to be your own publicist and maybe you don't have the money to retain a firm or you really don't know anything about the PR industry. This last slide is probably the most important takeaway if you're going to be reaching out to the media. And with the media, like so many other areas in business and in life, it's all about relationships. And so it's so important to develop meaningful relationships with journalists. And so how do you do that? If you're saying, well, Annie, I didn't work in TV news. I don't have all these built-in producer relationships. I don't know any of them. You can still make those relationships if you work at it and you take to heart some of the advice in this slide. So the first thing you need to do is to do your research and identify first internally, what are the 5 biggest outlets that I would really love our company to get featured in. So is it the Wall Street Journal? Is it the, WESH affiliate in Florida? Is it NPR? Is it, Cranes, Florida? Whatever the publication is, identify what are the outlets, the media outlets that are going to be the most impactful for you and your business? And then from there, it's really important to identify the specific journalist or the specific reporter or producer who focuses on your specific coverage area. When you're doing research and you want to reach out to, your local newspaper, a lot of times they'll be, send a tip to news at, orlandotimes.com. That's fine, but a lot of times that's going into a general mailbox and people are not really going to read that or pick that up. You want to find the reporter who is consistently covering the area that your business is focused in. And then from there, though, you're not just going to want to send an email saying, I run this great business, you should cover me. You're definitely not going to want to do that. Instead, you're going to want to do your research and identify what subject areas that journalist typically focuses on. So if it's spotlighting local small businesses, if it's talking about trends within a specific sector, if it's focusing on local news, focusing on local businesses and the economy, whatever that is, you're going to want to really understand and absorb that. Read her or his articles, get to know what types of stories seem to be of interest to them, but then also read or watch their news reports through the lens of the consumer. And, a lot of times these journalists aren't just putting together stories just for the hell of it. They're doing it because they want to have a takeaway to the reader or the viewer at home. And by takeaway, I mean, what is the viewer or the reader getting out of it? A lot of times, think of the phrase news you can use. And you want to think of, well, how is, by pitching my story, how is that potentially benefiting the reader at home? And so, keep that in mind a lot of times. And if you're not coming up with a clear-cut angle, then it may just be a good idea to email the journalist and just say, I really admire your work. I've read, your recent pieces. Reference something personal and really specific that they wrote about. So that way they'll know that you're not just BSing them, that you've actually really taken the time to get to know who they are and where their coverage area lies. And just say, I live in your coverage area. I run this business. I realize that there may not be an opportunity for us to work together right now, but I just wanted to reach out and say, hey, and I like your work, and maybe we can stay in touch in the future. I think that approach can go a long way with different journalists, because it's better to make a connection with a journalist and be honest in that way than to push forth a story that feels too self-promotional. I would also say that when you're trying to develop and maintain real relationships with journalists, you should follow them on social media. Most journalists are open on Twitter, especially, and on LinkedIn. And this will give you just more of an insight into where their interests lie and, sort of what areas they're covering. And then, I would also just say to not get discouraged if you don't hear back. It is okay to follow up, just to not do it too much. It's important to remember that when you're trying to get featured in the media, the media, the journalist, the newspaper, the producer, they don't owe you anything. They're not really there to help you. You're actually there to be a resource to them and see if you could be beneficial to their reporting in any way. So as long as you kind of keep that in mind and you're respectful, and remember that journalists are real people too, going through all of the rest of the struggles that all of us are going through, especially right now. I think keeping that in mind will help lead to a more meaningful relationship. So that is my presentation for right now. I would love to hear if there's any questions from the audience, and hopefully we can keep talking. I don't really know how this works, if there are any questions or not. But I'll hang on here for a few minutes if people want to chat through a question. That would be great. Well, I don't think that there's any questions, so I will just say that it's been a pleasure to talk to all of you, and hopefully, if any of you have questions, you can find me on the web at pacepublicrelations.com. My email address is up there, and would love to stay in touch with all of you, and hopefully help in any way I can when it comes to PR. So thank you all so much.